Good morning. It's 11 o'clock, so it's Paula from On a String, and I'm about to start my Facebook Live on using found objects. Today I will try and manage to do some of the comments a little bit easier than I did last week and hopefully not cut anybody off. So I'm going to try and do a two-screen thing so I can see comments. But what I'm going to do today is show you how I have used found objects, good morning Linda, in beadwork. And for me, found objects are things that I have found in an op shop, could be found in my jewellery box, some old stuff. It could be things that I've been given that were perhaps my grandma's. So I've got a few little bits and pieces that I'm going to show you today. And as usual, these Facebook Live demonstrations usually go for about an hour. So I can talk about beading for an hour quite easily. Hello, Tracy. Hi, Lavinia. And so what I'm going to do today is just go through and show you how I've used some of those things in projects that I've finished. And then I'm going to demonstrate probably, one full earring, a bit of a pendant, a couple of other ideas around pendants. I'm going to see how it goes. It'll be a little bit of design on the fly, basically. I have prepped, though, and I have got some stuff out to actually do, but I will possibly change my mind as I go through and do it. So what we're going to do today is have a look at a couple of things. So bear with me while I flip the camera around and do a couple of things and switch over. Good morning, Glenda. So one of the things we're going to look at today is how to use a chandelier spike in a pendant. So I whipped that one up this morning so that I could demonstrate showing that. So we will go through that one. And I'm just going to flip you over here to my work table. And here's some of the things that I've sort of found that I want to be trying to experiment with today. So here are some of these chandelier spikes, and you can see there's the beautiful glass drop. And they've got this little tiny sort of hexagon rivoli, we'd call it in bead world, but it is a crystal shape with two holes in it. So there's the original metallic hook that's from the chandelier, and that hooks to the long drop. So we'll be using some of those today. Other things I've sort of found, this is a piece that I found in the op shop. So these are some little polymer clay discs, in grey. I think that was $3, $2. Might have been a bargain that day. So they're the sort of things, if I go into an op shop, I generally try and have a look around and see what other things are in there that, I might like to take apart. So that's another piece that I've done. This was in my jewellery box. Now, this was at one point a set of earrings and pendant that I think my mum got from the Northern Territory from some reason. I think that's where they came from. But, over the years I've either broken a glass drop or lost a bit and piece of it. So that's something that could definitely be reutilised in a pendant. They're beautiful little pink and gold ones, so I should really reuse those. This is some brooches. So brooches, that you buy from craft markets or wherever, definitely easy. Take the back off that and use that in something else. Same with this one. This is a fabric brooch. Take the back off, use that as a pendant. Potentially even the owl could actually do that as well. So that's some of the ideas I've got from looking in my jewellery box and things and thinking how I could utilise them. And then here's a little bit more in that space, and I'll sort of start some of these today. So this one here, this was a brooch from my grandma, and I've taken the back off that already, so I can show you that today. But I'm actually going to demonstrate that with, this was a piece of a jade sort of pendant. I think this was one of my brother's, so I don't know how I've landed with it. But, automatically you can see how you can build out a piece using two found objects together. So that would be like a pendant top and then a jade drop bottom. I've got a couple of other pieces of jade. I think my mum bought me those back from Alaska. So when I finish that one, that's one that I'll probably give to my mum because, they're pieces from my brother, my grandma and my mum. So that one will be a pendant. This one here, this is interesting. These were the wedding earrings I wore for my sister's wedding. So these were her bridesmaid's earrings. And so these, antiques, 30 years old. So these ones here are glass, and they've got little sequins and flowers on them, and they've got an earring back stud. And you can see where they've sort of been glued, etc. together. We had a very, 1980s sort of dynasty style wedding when she got married. And this is the second one. Now, this one's actually got one of the pieces has disappeared, and a couple of these are a bit loose this morning, so I have glued them back on ready to do. But to me, these will actually go together really nicely with that sort of combination of, you know, silver and crystal and pearl, etc. And I can visualize how that will become a pendant, you know, and it will have that sort of pearl drop finish, etc. So that's another one that I'm going to have a look at today. This is part of the Chandelier Spikes. So you can see here the top disc part of the chandelier with its two holes. I'm actually going to utilise that to make an earring. So there's the first one that I've done. A really simple warped square on the top of that in, you know, some red and nickel and that bright silver colour. And then the little pearl drop at the end. So I've used O beads and some red and silver in that. So that's another one that I can sort of go through and show today. And then when I was having a look at sort of the brooches, if you know me, you know how much I love black and white and Collingwood. Well, there's a chevron brooch. I'm going to whip the back off that and turn that into a tassel pendant as well. So that's just some of the ideas around using things that I found in my drawers, etc. today. But I'm also going to show you a couple of other things. So I did a class with Nancy Kane earlier in this year, and we actually made this. Well, there's one of those chandelier spikes, and you can see there, that's my ring holder. So I used the disc of the chandelier in the bottom of that, and then I've used the spike of the chandelier on the top. So that's something that, you know, it's decorative but functional, and I've used those two components to actually create a ring holder with that. So thinking about how to repurpose and use things not just in jewellery but in, you know, beaded objects is part of the challenge. Another one that I want to show you today as well, and this is probably where part of my obsession with found objects came from. I'm getting a studio tour too. This was a piece I did last year or the year before, I can't remember. But that particular brooch face there, that came from an op shop in Northcote. And look, I think I paid $30 for the brooch. I can't remember, but you know, Northcote prices was probably a little bit overpriced. And what I did was actually then turn that into a pendant. So you can see there I've added, you know, little sort of pearls at the top and then some little tiny beaded Rivoli buttons. I've done I think it's called blue jasper, sort of beaded rope. It's actually then got this sort of Chinese looking or Asian looking finish at the end. And I think I got that in, it might have been in Prague I picked that piece up with. The tassel on the bottom of that was one half of a tassel earring that came from Sports Girl. So you can see there that piece has got several different components from other areas that I would consider to be found objects. So that's utilising things that I find in shops, etc., and putting them into beadwork, not just from bead shops. And I've got one other that I want to show you. I've got to try and find it here in this is my mess of a storage system here. And it's there it is. It's the noisiest piece that I own. Can you hear that noise coming through? So this is a class on found objects that was part of a bead and button show. And what this actually does, it's got all sorts of things in it. You know, little half coins. I think that little L there came off a perfume bottle, Scrabble tile, little piece pendant. It's got, I think there's a Collingwood membership in here somewhere, Penny. There's a part of a fishing lure in there as well. Another sort of coin. There's a little tiny key. Somewhere else is, I think my son's vice captain badge is on there somewhere. Oh, there it is, vice captain from his school. So that was just a collection of bits and pieces. I actually don't wear this piece though because I feel like a Jersey cow when I wear it because it's so bloody noisy. But that's basically using, you know, little sort of screws and hexagon nuts and all sorts of things to create a found objects necklace. So some of that is beadwork, but other pieces, you know, that's off a zipper sort of fishing lure, I think, a couple of washers. So there you go. That's some of the ways that I've used found objects. Now I'm just going to flip over to the camera over here so that I can show you how we're going to work on some of these things. So bear with me while I just set this up properly. Yes, Penny, you saw the Collingwood thing, didn't you, in there? So I'm just going to plug in too so that we get to see. And okay, flip that around. Okay, so now you can actually see my bead board, hopefully. So as I said, bear with me, I'll try and monitor comments as well, but what I'm going to do today is show you how I made and utilised pieces out of this chandelier spike to make a pendant. So the chandelier spike comes like this, and it's got the long drop of the chandelier on there. It's already got a hole, but you can see, I don't know if you'll be able to see on camera, but the hole actually doesn't go all the way through. So I did ask Colin, you know, is there any way I can drill a hole in glass? And he told me no, I'd shatter it. So I had to think about how I was going to retain the use of that hole to keep the beads on top. So I'll go through that a little bit later. It's got a wire that goes through it. So it's got a little sort of flat head pin side at one side, and then that loops onto that top crystal. But I actually want to really keep that wire in this pendant drop because I want to make sure that I can use that to attach the beads to it. So, you know, sometimes you might want to pull apart a piece completely and take every single element off so that it is, you know, clean. But in this circumstance, I really want to retain that wire there so that I can reuse it. So I'm just going to very gently just cut off that. Oh, I'll reach over and grab my pliers. I'm going to cut off this top rivelet here because I want to reuse that to make the earring. And then I'm just going to sort of try and remove that wire that's on there. But I want to keep that part of the spike in the piece because that's going to be really critical to actually attach the beadwork. And what I'm doing now is I'm actually just straightening that so that I can put a bead on top of it, but it's still secure in the pendant. It's not going to come out, it's got a bend in there, but it will give me an opportunity to actually capture that at some point. So yeah, this is part of how I'll try and show you how to do this little bit. So what I'm going to start with, and when I'm planning a piece, I like to think about all of the colours that will be complementary. Hi, Kerry. In the middle, Alex. Am I in the middle? Please tell me that you can see things on screen. If I go off screen, let me know. What I'll try and do is come up with complementary colours that actually are going to make this piece, you know, shine basically. So for me, if you know me, you'll know how much I love, you know, black and rose golds. So what I've done there is I've actually pulled out all the black and rose gold pieces that I think will be going in this piece. And part of it is about graduation. You know, when you're working on a piece that's got a decreasing sort of diameter, I want to have pieces that start off big and then go to small. So make sort of a cone shape on the piece. So if you look at this one here, so here is a finished spike with a, you know, few beads embellished on it. So this has got a ring that I started with. It's then got some 2-hole beads, which are the kite beads. It's got a little black bead at the top, which is holding that insecure, and that's where we use that little metal spike as well. And there you go, that's finished. Black silk rope on that, and there is a piece done. So it doesn't take a lot to make a pretty stunning piece really easily. So I'm going to go through and show you some of that today. So I am going to use a fire line in this. So for beaders, fire line is our, it's the main beading thread that I use. It is a type of fishing line, and it's a sort of thread that they say it doesn't break. That's not true. I can break it, and particularly when you are using sharp crystals, it can break. But, you know, I do try and use fire line for most of the things that I make, but I will show you today how I've also used some 1G, Nymo in the warped square as well when I go onto the earring. So I'm just going to thread on, I don't know, about 1.5 meters, I suppose, of thread. And I want to start with a piece that's actually going to give me a little ring to build off. And a lot of this stuff, when you're doing, you know, a graduated piece like this, you need a start point and you need to build up and you need to build down. And building up, I use, you know, smaller and smaller beads to decrease the top, and then building down, I use bigger beads to actually go over. So that's just part of the maths and the logic in a piece like this. And as always, I would prefer to stick with an even number of beads as opposed to an odd number. Even number makes it much easier to do counts, etc. of. And I know that for the start of this, I need 12 beads on my needle. And I think that's 12, 4, 8, that is 13. So I shall take one off. So 12 beads. And I'm actually just going to tie those into a ring with, you know, a couple of double knots in that. And I know that this size fits over the top of that spike. So I'll just tie that in a bit of a double knot. Come on, concentrate. Yep. Pull that tight. Not too tight, you know, I still want to have a bit of movement because I want to add bits and pieces in between that. And I'm just popping that over the top of the spike here and just sort of roll it down. So you can see there, I've got some gappy bits in there as well, which is okay because we're going to utilize those gaps. And I'm just sort of holding that onto my pendant spike at the moment. And I'm just going to go through a couple of times, go around those beads so that I don't know what you mean by middle. So when you say middle, I can see on my phone that I am in the middle. So if I'm not in the middle when you look at it, I am lost. But if that is the middle, I will try and retain that spot there. So can someone just give me a thumbs up that that is the middle for you as a viewer? That would be great. Okay, so I've sort of gone through that a couple of times, and now I'm just going to pull, you know, my tail thread and my working thread. Sometimes I am out. Oh yeah, it's a bit hard. It's I try my best, so that's all I can do, I suppose. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually doing a bit of a locking knot over the thread bridge there so that it will, that is the middle. X marks the spot. Okay, so right here is the spot. Move a bit more to your left. So up here, Glenda, is that better? Okay, so you can see here I've done a locking knot, so that's, you know, pretty secure now, that ring on there. And what I'm going to do now is I want to actually fill some of those holes with what I think they're triangle beads, big triangles. I don't know what you'd call them, but they're a 2-hole bead shape, and they've got that sort of little tiny domed profile on the top of them, and they've got a big hole at the top and the bottom. But what I really liked about them for this piece was they've got a really nice pointed edge at the bottom, a pointed spike. So that's going to fit in these little gaps beautifully. So I pick up from the small end, and I'm actually going to skip through 2 beads. So remember I did an even count number before. So this is to build like a little sort of wall, I suppose, that these beads will start to form around the top of this spike. So I've now got 2 in. I've got to remember to go the right way so that the dome goes from the goes to the outside. Come on. You've moved the piece towards yourself. I actually haven't, but well, I'll just keep doing my best, and hopefully you get to see it. It is a little bit of a challenge. So I'm still going through and just skipping every second bead. And popping that little triangle in there. And I'm actually holding on to it at the moment because at the moment it's not secure at all. So I am holding that in place as I bead. I mean, it's very loose, etc., but it will start to firm up a little bit further down the track to there. And 1 more. And I should now have, because I had an even number and I had 12, I should have 6 of these triangles around my piece. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah. So I'm actually just going to pull that a bit tighter now so that those end pieces pop in between those beads. I started with a size 8 bead. If you've done any of my classes, you'll know how much I love a size 8 bead. The holes in them are great for foundation and for anchoring things. So I really have enjoyed using those in different projects. Because the idea now is to try and reduce the size of that ring so that it becomes more secure. So what I'm popping in now, I'm going to take advantage of the top hole. So I'm going to bring my thread through to the top hole there. Paula, if you could keep that near the bottom of the gold packet of beads, you will be seen. Here or here? I'm getting lots of advice. Thank you. I'm trying my best though. Okay, so I'm picking up this little 2mm fire polish bead. If the comments are in the way and you can see the comments, you can actually turn off comments so you don't have that on your screen, and that might make it easier if they're getting in the way. So look for the little comment box and just cross that, and then you won't actually see them on the screen, and that might make it easier. Please keep your hands towards the small box of small as you're out of range. Okay, I'm trying. Okay. All right, so I'm going to keep popping those little 2mm fire polish beads in between on those top holes. And you can see here now, because these are a smaller bead, what they're doing is they're starting to draw closed this ring that I've made. It's still very loose. Hello, Sue. Nice to see you here too. But I will get that secure, because remember that little metal spike at the very start? I'm taking advantage of that shortly. We will be utilising that in this piece. So because I couldn't drill a hole all the way through the glass without breaking it, thanks, Colin. So now I'm drawing that tight. And so what that's done is that's started to close up the top of that ring. So it's going to give me something to actually start to build off now as well. But I'm actually going to run my needle all the way through again on those beads, just so that that is a bit tighter again. And this is the thing with beading, you know, you have to reinforce rows. It creates a level of tension as you start to pull more thread through your beads. It fills the beads with thread, so it makes them harder to move around. So never be frightened of going through, you know, a few times if you need to, just to make it secure. And as I start to pull that tight, it now is forming a really nice firm ring over the top of that spike. And I might just go through a couple more just to, you know, really embed that in. So I've now got, you know, a base ring that I can start to build off. I've got some big holes here at the bottom on those size 8 beads. I've got some more sections here I can start to do a bit of work off the top area. And I'm now going to, I want to have a little anchor bead, something that's in between here that I can build from again. So a lot of beading is about, you know, creating anchors and foundations to move off. So I am going to now pop I think I put a black one in, a little black size 15 in between each of those. So that's actually going to sit on top of those fire polish beads. So I'll come back through again, another bead, so I'm in the right spot, and I'll pop a little black size 15 in between each of those triangle beads. And can you see that there? The black bead is now sitting on top of the fire polish bead. And that one there will be our anchor point to build the next row from. So I've now taken advantage of both the top hole and the bottom hole on the 2-hole beads. And, you know, there's a lot of talk in the beading world about 2-hole beads and how they've changed beading. I love them. I use them in lots of different projects. I find them to be a really good interchangeable piece in beadwork. I mean, I like to think I'm a bit of a purist at times too around beading, but I do like the variety that a 2-hole bead gives you in creating, you know, some really unusual profiles and shapes in beading. And yeah, I do have quite a selection of different colours and shapes of 2-hole beads, and I do get a bit disappointed when, you know, the manufacturers decide they're not going to make a particular shape, etc. anymore. But anyway, so you can see now I've now got my 6 little tiny black beads in between each of those, and I'm now going to just come up through one of those black beads there, and I'm going to use that as a foundation to start to build some net over the top of this the triangle beads. And for this one I'm using my all-time favourite galvanised light beige in the Miyuki size 11 seed bead 1072L. I use these all the time. It is the best rose gold colour that I find, and I really enjoy using that in all sorts of beadwork. So if you're looking for a great rose gold colour, the Miyuki 1072L. Are those spike beads really available? Lavinia, I was actually gifted a whole lot of these chandelier pendants. So what I have decided to do is I will give a set of 2 of the Rivoli drops and a pendant to somebody who comments today on this feed. So I will make sure that somebody gets them. So there'll be a random draw done at the end of today's Facebook Live, and somebody will actually receive in the mail a chandelier spike and 2 little Rivolis, and they can then play around with those as well. So thank you for mentioning that. I was very fortunate. Somebody gifted me a whole lot of these chandeliers, and I can use some of them, but I'd love for somebody else to experiment with them as well. So where's that black bead gone? Goodness me, I need my glasses on here to see that one. It's slipped in underneath there. Or has it disappeared altogether? Oh, there it is. See how that black one's gone? I don't know if you can see that, gone right underneath the fire polish. So I'm just going to get my ever handy awl tool, the awl tool for all things. I love it, just to make sure that that black one is in the right spot. So I'm keeping on adding 4 of the size 11 Miyuki beads over the top of each of those triangles, using that black size 15. See how it just came off because it's nowhere near secure yet, to keep it, to anchor those with. All good though, rescued, I've got it back on. Rose gold and black, one of my favourite combos too, Glenda. I love it. I mean, I am a Mimco fan, so I do like the, you know, the rose gold and black that comes from Mimco. If you don't know what Mimco is, it's, you know, a handbag sort of company here in Melbourne, and they make gorgeous ranges of, you know, handbags and purses and keys and all sorts, key rings and all sorts of things in their signature colours of black and rose gold. So I love using those combinations as well, particularly, you know, a shiny black with the rose gold looks really good. So I've now got my 4 size 11s over the top of each of those triangles, and what that is going to do is start to reduce down the top of my little crown or ring or whatever a bit further. So I'm going to come up through the first 3 beads on that the set of 4 that I've added, and to reduce that even further, I want to then add, and I've got to have a look and see what I did on this other one. I want to now add 1 bead in between each of those sets of 4 to start to tighten that, and this time I'm going to use a black size 11. So as I said earlier, with a graduating piece as a foundation, it's a matter of decreasing down and increasing out, you know, on the size of the piece. So now I'm adding a size 11 black in between each of those group of 4. But what I'm doing is popping a black there and just pulling through tightly, and that's starting to make this little net tighter and tighter and tighter. Nice to see that you're commenting for a prize, Gail. That is lovely. So anyone who comments today can go into the draw to win a chandelier spike and 2 little Rivoli beads, and you will then have your own set that you can make something out of those found objects. And I really hope that, you know, what I'm sort of showing you today gives you a bit of inspiration to raid your jewellery boxes, your mum's jewellery box, you know, whatever, to try and find things. So now when you see how I'm pulling that tight now, I'm now starting to build a really nice firm net over the top of that pendant spike. So I've still got to take advantage of that piece of metal at the top, and I still need to keep building up so that everything is well and truly covered on that. But I've got a really good foundation now. So the idea of different beads to net from comes through from each of those little foundations that I've put in. So now I'm coming up through the 11. And remember what I said earlier, part of the challenge is continually reducing the size of this ring by changing bead sizes. So my next one I'm going to pop in is a size 8 rose gold bead. So because I've kept my color combination really monochromatic on this, you know, it's just the two colors, I've really just pulled out a selection of black and rose gold beads that will, in varying sizes, to use in this piece. And they will just, you know, I change my mind or change an option every time as well, just to sort of see, you know, how different ones work. But just keep remembering to drop a size or increase a size, or have two beads instead of one, or whatever's going to work to continually change the size of your little net. So now I've got 6 beads in there. I have seen these chandeliers in op shops, yep, with heaps. So that's exactly right. They are the sort of thing that, you know, in an op shop would definitely have, because people don't necessarily want dust collectors anymore, and this might have been considered a dust collector at some point. So now I want to try and reduce that gap again that's between those two size 8s. So I'm coming out of an 8 and now I'm popping a black 8 in between. Yes, Lorraine, this will be available on my Facebook page after I finish today. So if you've missed the start, you can watch from the start. I will go over some of the things I talked about at the start as well. Yes, we definitely will all be raiding the op shops, because op shops, and the other place I like to look when we are allowed to go back to shopping, is places like, Lavisa and Colette, and, you know, Sports Girl, etc., because they have some really fun, you know, modern things that can easily be taken apart. So you can look at Sports Girl for things like tassels, you know, tassel earrings, and take the tassels apart. You can look to somewhere like Lavisa for chains. So chains are really good to use in pieces as well. And I often, you know, will go into those shops and to get a chain and take off whatever the bits and pieces are from the piece of jewellery and repurpose that. So now I want to still keep building up this net. So now I'm just going to do another row of size 8. So I'm just doing a basic tubular peyote, or tubular peyote. So going up and down in between each of these previous rows, so that I'm getting more and more to the top of my net, and I'm nearly there. And the size and the number of rows that you need to do is all dependent upon how many beads you started off your ring with, and the actual degree or diameter of your decrease of that particular piece. So I'm nearly at the top, so you can see my little metal bit is still in there as well. I am going to use that at some point. I'm pulling that really tightly now. It still would come off if I pulled it off, but we will make sure that it doesn't come off when it's an actual finished piece. So I've now got, you know, look at that lovely little crown that's on the top. So what I love about this is, you know, you can still see the glass coming through there as well. And I just really want to try and build this top part now. So because the diameter of this spike is now reducing, I'm going to pop a size 11 bead in now in between each of those size 8s to start to make that net smaller and smaller and smaller. So an 11 goes in there. Where are they? I need some more. Another 11 in there. Now, you've got the choice. I mean, you know me, I can talk about beading and talk all day if you really want me to, but we've all got things to do. So you've got the choice of me demonstrating how to make the earring out of the warped square, which some of you might already know, or I'm happy to go on and do some bead embroidery as well. So if people want to sort of say what they want to see, that would be helpful. Or I can do both if you want to see both as well. But I might not finish both. I might just start both of them. But let me know if there's something that you desperately need me to do from start to finish, or if you're happy for me to do bits and pieces of the next couple of projects, I can do that too. So what I'm doing now is I'm popping a rose gold one on top of each of the previous rose gold earring, please. Thank you, Penny. So that I'm still continuing to decrease. More the merrier. I'll do my best, Glenda. I'm still continuing to decrease this net. So it's a little bit gappy just at the moment, but that will start to sort itself out. So I'm just using my thumbnail to make sure that those beads are in the right spot. So using my thumbnail to move that over. So you can see there that the little nets, columns of this tubular peyote net have got, oh, that one's in the wrong spot. That's what happens when it's live. You get to see mistakes and all. So you can see there, that one there. Oh no, it's in the right spot. It is in the right spot. So now when I start to draw that close, that's going to come up over the top of that spike. See, I don't know if you saw that action. I'll do that again. So there, if I pull down that net like that on the spike, if I pull that tight, all of a sudden that drew up over the top of that like that. So you can see there, I've now got a really nice ring around the top of that net, the crystal, and that's now in place. And what I want to do now is put a bead on the top of that to hold it in place, and I'm going to make use of the bead embroidery. Bead embroidery is winning. You know that's my favourite thing to do. I do love a bit of bead embroidery. And if you've done warp squares, you know how to make it, those ones. But I will go through and show that too for a bit. So I'm just going to grab one extra bead out of my stash over here. I need a disc bead that's going to sit on the top of that spike and hold everything in place. And what I'm going to use is some of these. This is like a black round disc like that, and it's sort of flat, it's a bit squashed I suppose, but what it does is it fits beautifully on that little metal piece here, just like that. And because I've kept that piece of metal in there, what I want to do is take advantage of that, pull that up tighter like that, and I'm just going to fold that over the top of the bead. I'll try and keep in camera so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just folding that little metal spike over the top of the bead there. So what that will do, we're eventually going to bead over it, so you're not going to see any of this. But the more I don't want to bend and pull it too much because I don't want it to break. I mean, it is old and it could perish if I put too much pressure on it. But what that bead now will do, will stop that metal piece coming out, which we're actually now going to bead over the top of that, and that will keep everything secure on this little netted crown. So, you know, I've taken advantage of the fact that the piece of metal was already in there. I didn't cut it off, and I couldn't make a hole in the glass because, you know, I would have shattered everything. But that little black bead now, which when you look at the finished one, is underneath the net here. Okay, so I'm just going to take advantage of that black bead and the wire and do a bit of net over the top of it. So for a net is probably 5 beads peyote 5 beads in a little triangle shape that I'm going to just do in between each of those previous rose gold beads. So I'm just picking up 5 size 11 beads, and you do an odd count number and go through each of those size 11s. So I should end up with 6 little triangles or wings sitting out from the top of that spike. And then I'm going to draw them closed in a second by going through each of those. So I enjoy, who watches, I enjoy. Thanks, Lorraine. Oh, I'm happy to just do whatever, but yeah, if people have, I know some people have got Joe's class this afternoon as well, so this will still be on Facebook if you need to shoot off, and if you're allowed out of your house, not like we are in Melbourne, but if you can go out and you've got things to do, go and do it, because this will still be there. But please and thank you for sticking with me while I sort of go through this stuff. And sometimes I never know what I'm going to do and talk about, but I've managed to talk already for, I don't know, what time is it? Yeah, 41 minutes, so I can keep going. And remember, everybody who comments today will go into a random draw to win their own chandelier spike and 2 little Rivoli beads, and you can then create your own from this. So when you have a look at the top of that, you can see there I've got these sort of little triangles now, and I want to draw them up over the top of that bead. So to do that, I think I probably need to do one more row of net, because when I look at that, it's not enough to actually come up over the top. So my next row of net, I'm actually going to reduce the size of my bead, and I'm going to use some size 15s. So again, I'm going to pick up 5 size 15 beads, and I'm coming out through the top of the previous set of 5, and then I'm going to go through the top of the next set of 5 there as well. So I'm creating these little triangle nets. You've got good idea, Glenda. Go through that tub of broken bits and pieces. You just never know what you're going to find in there and what you can repurpose. And this is, it's a good thing to sort of start your designing journey. If you're not into designing yourself, but you'd like to learn, it's a good way to start to think, well, how could I repurpose something in a piece of jewellery? And there's no rules. As you can see from some of those pieces I showed earlier, one has a piece from an op shop, a piece from Sports Girl, a piece from, a bead shop in, I think it was Prague. So, I've used all of those bits and pieces and then finished it off with beads out of my own sort of stash to make a one-off design. And, there's not going to be anyone else who's going to have that pendant with the Chinese face on it, because that's all come out of my head. And I couldn't even replicate that if I wanted to, because, trying to find all those same components again. So it certainly is a great way to do one-off design stuff. So now you can see I've got a smaller net coming over the top of that black piece there. And closer to the pearls over here, is that what you want to see? What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pop a 11, I would love a chandelier spike. I'm going to pop a black 11 in between the top of each of those previous nets. So that way, this will just, it'll be like magic. It will just close that whole net up and pop that over the top of that black bead that I placed there earlier. So I'm going through the center size 11 bead, size 15 bead on the previous net. I'm adding a black size 11. So you can see that I'm just picking up that center bead on each of those. That one's not the center one. That was the second from the center one. Picking up one black bead in between each one and moving that there. And one more. And then, like magic, over the top of that net is going to come, look at that. So you can see now, I mean, it's still a bit loose, but that's okay because I'm going to tighten it. But I've now managed to utilise that little piece of metal in the top of the chandelier. I've got a black bead under there to hold that down onto it. And what I've tried to avoid is, I'm not using glue in any of this. I really just want to use the beads and my tension to create that piece. And remember I said earlier, going through things again really helps. So I'm just going to go through again that top ring, that little piece of metal. I want to try and hide that in my beadwork at some point, and I will. So I'm going through all those beads again and again, just to tighten that. And so this, the one that I made earlier today, I think has probably 2 less rows going around it than what this one does. And that's all to do with tension. But, you know, as I said, they are similar, but they're not necessarily exactly the same. And part of that is bead size, bead tension, you know, all sorts of things. So I really want to try and cover over that little piece of metal. So I'm just going to grab my pliers. Remember, I don't want to bend that too much because I don't really want to break it, because then the whole, you know, structure and idea will come apart. But I'm just sort of turning that over on itself now rather than have it stick out. Okay, that's better. So now that's really nice and secure there too. Okay, so part of what I want to do now is make sure that this piece has a loop at the top to actually hang a rope or, you know, some sort of cord from. The one that I showed earlier, the finished one, that actually has a black silk knotted cord on it, because we all know how much I can't stand making a beaded rope. If I can avoid one, I will, because they take so long. So what I'm going to do now is make a loop out of, what will I make it out of? Some of these size 11 beads. So I'm just going to create a really simple simple loop, you know, probably 15 beads, maybe something like that. I think is probably enough, just to make a loop that goes over the top and bottom of these black beads. So I go directly in the opposite black bead there, then come back up through that whole loop that way. And I'm really pulling that tightly now. You know, it is really feeling much more secure than what it was when I sort of first started. And I'm just going back through all those beads again. And I'll do this a couple of times to make that loop really secure. And of course, as I said earlier, I've done this in, you know, my sort of colour combos and the monochromatic black and rose gold. But you could do any colour, any sort of 2-hole bead. It's really just about decreasing and increasing the number of beads in your ring. So by moving up and down will give you the shape of your netted cone. So I've now got, you know, my nice loop at the top. So you can see there, that's how I've actually attached the silk on that one there. So can you see the difference? This one is just slightly longer because I've added an extra row in there. But, you know, as I like to say, blind man would be happy to see that. And I'll keep moving that thread back through to the other side. Oh, hello, Vula, and hello, Jamie. Jamie's favourite colours. Jamie is my daughter-in-law, and she loves to wear my beadwork, so she may end up wearing one of these, I think, at some point. This is her sort of look and colour. So I'm now going to go, what I want to do is try and make this just a bit tighter around this sort of section here. So remember I said earlier about a size 8 bead and how much I love a size 8 bead. The beauty of them is the large holes. And those large holes are fantastic for further embellishment. So I'm now coming out of one of those size 8 beads that are in that centre ring. And, you know, pull out some of the beads. I like to try and use what's on my bead board rather than find, you know, another thing. So I'll pick up a 15, a 2mm fire polish and a 15. And I'm going to just pop that in between each of those size 8 beads. So a 15. I need some more of them. You see how messy I get when I bead. Goodness gracious. A 15, a 2mm and a 15. And I'm going to pop that in between, and that's the wrong one. I went into that bottom one. In between each of those size 8 beads. So you can see now that's given me a little bit of an edge, embellished edge around there. And the more I add on this, the firmer and firmer this whole net actually becomes. So I'm filling those holes with thread. I'm adding beads right around that whole edge. That one's, is it? That looked yellow gold, not rose gold. I'm filling those holes, really creating a strong foundation because of the size of the holes on the 8 size 8 bead. So, you know, don't be frightened. I know we all get a little bit purist about, you know, size 15s, they're lovely to work with and whatever, but size 8 as a foundation bead are fantastic. So I'm going to repeat that around that next row of size 8 beads. So I've got my 15, my 2mm fire polish of 15, and I'm just popping that in between each of those rose gold size 8 beads. And that one that I'm using there, that's my other favourite rose gold colour. It's the Toho PF551, which is a galvanised rose gold. And that is one that you will see in lots and lots and lots of my beadwork. I use that in the sort of the 15 and the 8 because Mayuki don't actually make that other colour that I talked about in a 15 or an 8. So I tend to use the Tohos in place of that. But great to actually have some variety in our beadwork. So you can see now I've got 2 rows of those crystals, little fire polish crystals around, but it's still a bit loose down here at the bottom. It's tight at the top. You know, our little net at the top has kept that all really firm. But what I want to do is add a little bit more down here so that the bottom part is tight as well. So I'm just going to move my needle to come down and out of one of these beads at the bottom. And, you know, you can continue to go on and add, you know, more little fringing in here if you wanted to. Wherever there's a hole and an opportunity, you can actually add, oh God, that sounded terrible, add some beads in there. So I now want to come out between those size 8s at the very bottom. So remember when I did that at the very start, what I said was I wasn't drawing that too tightly because I wanted to have take advantage of those holes and add other beads in between. So what I'm putting in now, these are some little 3mm Mayuki drops in the black. I'm just going to pop one of those in between each of those set of 2 at the bottom. See that there? Okay. I'm going to come right through the triangle and the size 8. Be good if I could do it in one move, but I can't. And pop one of those little tiny drops. So they've got a gorgeous, you know, spiked triangle bottom on them, which fits so nicely in that gap there. And come through that kite bead or triangle bead and up through that size 8 and pop that little drop in between. So what that's doing now is that's making that bottom row really firm. A little drop in between. Oh, nearly there, nearly there. Now some of these have got, you know, different, I don't know if you can see that on camera, but there's different profiles with some of these. So some of them, that one's a little bit wider than that one there. I mean, it's minute, but that one's a little bit narrower. There's another little sort of narrow one. I want to try and get the skinniest profile of these that I can so that it's going to fit in that hole there. And through that one there. One more to add. Bye, Lavinia. Nice to see you here. Go and enjoy your class. And yes, it will be available later to actually watch when I finish this. So there we go. I've now put that little drop in between each one of those there. And on this one, I then added a second layer of drops around the bottom, and then I added some 4mm round beads over the top of that. So I'm not going to add any more on that. You sort of get the gist of what I've done, but essentially the chandelier spike, I've taken advantage of the metal part that's in the spike. I've attached a bead at the top and I've secured that by netting over the top of it. And I've reduced my bead size and count as I've gone up the diameter, the narrower diameter of the spike, and increased it as I've come down. So that's essentially how to use the chandelier spike in a pendant. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move this beadboard out of the way and I'll go and grab another one and I'll show you a different project. So hang on with me 1 second. So that is using a chandelier spike. And I'm just going to show quickly these two here. So I will do some bead embroidery demonstration with that stuff in a second. But what I'm going to show you here is how I've used the top of the chandelier. So this was the Rivoli piece that came from the top. So this has got 2 holes in it already, so a hole all the way through there and a hole all the way through there. It's more domed at the back, so it's got a higher profile, and then it's got the cut off part at the bottom. And then what I did there was I made a warped square. Now, beaders, we know what a warped square is. It's a peyote start, so, 4 beads in a ring. You then build your little wings off the side, and I've just done an alternating shape and colour of either that. Yes, Lynn, I am Melbourne-based. That's why I'm stuck at home beading, because we're not allowed out of our houses. So what I did there was I made the little warped square, and remember what I said, we've got holes at the top and the bottom. So I have utilised that hole by beading through when I finished my warp square and just attaching that by going through that hole backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, and really making that secure at the bottom there of that triangle. I then went back to the top and created a little loop at the top, and then I've just attached an ear wire to the top of that there. As I've decorated, I've popped a little crystal, 4mm crystal on either point. And then I've added, and this was all done in this Nymo. So the Nymo thread of the cone is what I used to create that. But then when I've attached the drop at the bottom, I've used an O bead either side of the hole there, because the hole was a little large and the size 15s kept popping into the hole. So I popped an O bead either side, and then I've just done a little pearl drop on the bottom of it. So I think that's a really simple way to use those chandelier rivolis in that earring shape, and that's just created, a really, Christmas, black, white and red, some really cool colours in that one there as well. So I'm not going to show that one because I think you can probably learn how to make a warp square, but that gives you an idea of how to actually use those components there to make a beaded earring. So by popular request, I'm going to do some bead embroidery, which, as I said earlier, is my favourite thing to do. What size is the thread? So that thread, I think that's a B Nymo on the cone because it's a bit thicker than the D. I think that's a B. Okay, so I showed at the very start these earrings. So my sister got married in, I think 1987. So what are these, 30 odd years old? And these were the earrings we wore as bridesmaids. And it was a very dynasty, Dallas type wedding. We had big shoulder pads and, it was very, very glamorous. But these earrings she had handmade by somebody well before I became a beader. And they're made out of glass. And then they've got little sequins on top. They've got a little crystal on top. And someone has actually beaded the top of those as well. So you can see on the back there is a glued earring spike. So there I've got one that's actually, firmly in place. And here's the other one that when I rescued it out of my jewellery box, the back was a bit broken. So I don't know where the spike's gone. Well and truly the stud's finding's gone. And a couple of these little glass pieces were broken. They were sitting there just really gently. So I've glued all of those back on this morning so that they're ready for me to work with. And what I thought I'd do is actually mount those two pieces in a bead embroidery format. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove this spike or stud finding that's on the back. I'm actually not going to prise it off because I think the glue and etc. could break. So I'm actually just going to cut off that stud that's on the back there. And then what I want to do is I want to glue these two pieces down onto my foundation fabric. So a bit of E6000 glue on the bottom of that. I'm just sort of popping that onto the glass there and place that onto my foundation fabric. So what I'm using there is some Lacey's Stiff Stuff, or Nicole's Bead Backing, one of those brands. And because I've got a couple of broken ones, I'm just sort of going to try and place that so that it fills that hole where the missing piece was. Okay, so you can see there I've popped those two earring pieces, one on top of the other, on my foundation fabric. So that's now going to form a really nice base for me to be able to fill with beads in a bead embroidery format. And because it's bead embroidery, I will use a cotton thread rather than a fire line thread, if I can find one here handy. I've only got a pink one. Hang on, I've just got to grab a thread out. I'm actually going to use the Nymo thread on that because I love the feel of that with bead embroidery. You can use fire line as well, but for this I am going to use another Nymo off the cone bead as well, high thread as well. So I've got some there in a, just checking if I've got a grey, I've got a grey handy. No, I'm going to use this one. So this is another Nymo on the cone. This one's a D. Oh no, there you go, it's a B. There you go. B light tan. So that's a lighter colour to use with this. And I'm going to just thread my needle. As always, I like to use as big a needle as I possibly can when I do my beadwork because I love a crowbar and much easier to handle. I'd rather swap down to a smaller needle if I need to go through beads, but for me, I will always start with the biggest needle that I possibly can. And then I want to think about, in placement for bead embroidery, what's really going to frame and finish this piece? Because what I want to get to is a point where I've got a really nice beaded edge around here so that it actually becomes a shape. And, potentially, this is design on the fly, potentially I could actually sort of draw a bit of a frame around that so I know the direction and how to fill things. So if I wanted to potentially, say, make this a shield shape. So if I just draw, ignore the pen, you're not going to see this because I'll cut that off later. So if I just, by hand, just draw a bit of a shield shape around this. That will give me the frame to be able to bead around. Yeah, that looks pretty good, I reckon. What do you think about that? Any feedback from anybody about that as a shape? So that just sort of shows me where I now have to fill in with beads. So what I've pulled out to actually do this is a whole lot of cream, silver, white beads that I'm actually going to add some silver seed beads with. So I've got my bright silver Mayukis. I love these. These are gorgeous colour. $30 a box, so I do love using them though because I think the colour's beautiful. And then I've got them also the bright sterling plated as well in the 15s. So I want to use those beads in a fringing method to actually fill in all these gaps of this shield that I've just created. And I love to just sort of mix it up on my bead board, create a little bit of a sort of a bead soup look. So what I'm doing now is I'm just popping out, 3 or 4 different shapes and sizes and colours of beads in those colour combinations. So they, as I said earlier, what I like to do is plan out the piece by just adding a whole lot of beads to my bead board and then mixing it up, creating that, you know, bead soup sort of look with it. There's a few little crystals in there too, and a few little clear ones. And now when I mix that together, you know, I get this really luscious monochromatic look of cream and white and silver, which when you put that with the piece there, how cool does that look together? And it really matches in with the theme of these sort of glass beaded earrings. So I've got my little frame there. I'm actually going to trim some of that fabric off because when you do bead embroidery, having square corners on things is a pain in the neck and the thread often catches on it. So I'm just trimming that right back now, still leaving an edge, but just trying to avoid having some sharp corners on my foundation fabric because otherwise the thread will just catch the whole time and drive me mental. So I've now got my shape there. I've got my two foundation focals that have been pushed down and they've been glued on. And now I want to fill this whole piece with as much sort of fringed beading as I can from my little bead soup section with size 15s and size 11s. So I pop some size 11s on my board and now some size 15s. And what I do is I pick up an 11, a focal and a 15 at random. I'm really not thinking about, you know, which bead I'm popping where. And then I'm just going to thread through the, skip over the 15 and thread through the focal bead and the size 11 and pop that back down into my beadwork like that. And I'm going to continue that everywhere over this whole piece so that it's entirely fringed with this seed bead or this mix that I've made. And, you know, as I'm starting to use it, if I think I'm running out, it's pretty easy because I haven't thought about what I'm actually putting in. I can just add more beads to it. I can add more of the white, more of the silver, whatever I need, just to fill that. And having different sizes and shapes, oh, that was a fresh air shot, Paula. Different sizes of shapes in this will help make that, you know, a really organic look as I start to build the fringing. I use this method a lot in beadwork, particularly in a bead embroidery when I'm trying to cover a piece. Something like my diffuser hearts have this sort of fringed finish on them. And what I'm doing now is I'm just go through your broken jewels, Lynn. What a great idea. Happy to help out anytime you need any inspiration for anything. So by all means, everybody, when you get your old jewels, etc. out and you think, gosh, what can I do with that? Oh, just message me. I'm happy to give you some advice if you're not sure what to do with anything. So you can see now I've added sort of, 3 beads in that fringe section now. I'm just going to keep adding at random different beads so that I entirely fill up this shape of the shield that I freehand drew earlier. And the more that I add in, the more organic this feel of this piece and the more rich and lush it actually looks. And it's a really great finish to fill in this sort of stop-start beadwork. So you can see there now, I've got one little section sort of done. Let's just keep adding at random different beads. I probably need a couple of bigger beads in this mix, which I haven't really added in. So I might grab a couple of silver size 6 mils, I think. What I've used here primarily is a 4 mil and a 3 mil. Some of the 2-hole beads, like the spike beads, work really well with this. You can, pretty much add anything, but it's about keeping the colours in a palette that is actually sort of monochromatic, I think, is what works really well. How tightly together is each fringe section? Pretty tight, Silver. Like what I'm doing now is you really don't see any of that foundation fabric. I'm if you see at the back there, you can see my needlework at the back. So I just keep, you know, going in and out of the beadwork and trying to bunch those fringe beads next to each other as close as possible. I'll grab a finished piece and show you how I've actually done that on a couple of other things in a second. So you can see, and as I pull and move that thread around, the pieces just sort of move. So I keep coming from the back to the front, back to the front the whole time, and just adding in a size 11 bead, a focal, and then a size 15, going back through, you know, skipping over the 15 and going back through the focal and the size 11, and then just sort of pulling that tightly. So you can see there now I've got one sort of section started to fill. I'll probably go, you know, not right to the edge because I don't want to see any blue. I want to cut that off at some point, but it gives me a bit of a guide as to where I need to keep adding my beads onto. So I'll add a few more. Now, when I've finished, you know, filling that, and I won't get to do all of that today because that'll probably take me a couple of hours to do that, and I can talk, but not for another 2 hours. When I've finished filling all of that, I will mount this onto some sort of leather backing. So I've got some beautiful silver leathers and things there. So I will mount that, and then I will do a bead embroidery edge. And my favourite bead embroidery edge to do is using either an O bead or a Demi round bead. And it creates a really nice lacy effect, which I think will look terrific with these earring pieces. So I've nearly finished that sort of section there, and you can see I'm just randomly, I'm not even thinking about what I'm picking up each time on my needle. I just, whatever sort of jumps on the needle is what goes in next, and just tightly pushing those in and out. Now, I didn't glue down these glass pieces here. I only glued the center of it, and it's probably worth at some point, you know, running a couple of threads over some of that glass underneath there just to make sure that it doesn't pop out. So you need to think about your piece that you're using as your focal, how and do you need to attach that, or is glue going to be enough, or whatever. Just got to think about it when you're actually doing your piece. But for me, for this one, I think really just securely attaching those earrings, as much as I glued them, I think I will need to run a couple of threads just underneath the beadwork, underneath that sort of sequined area there. See, that one sort of moved a little bit so that they don't move. So does that sort of make sense how I'm going to finish that piece off? Because I think I'll move on to something else now. But you can see what I'm going to do, and that will just create a gorgeous focal. It will then have, you know, sort of a pearl drop at the bottom. I think that's probably what I'll do. And that's something, you know, as I said, these were the earrings from my sister's wedding. So I'll possibly give those to my sister when I finish that one. Silk rope, beautiful. There's a piece well and truly done. Now, I'm just going to pull the camera up a little bit and go back over to my section over here. So for people who join me a bit later, as I said at the very start, this is a piece that I made from an op shop find, which was this face. So I found this face brooch in an op shop a long time ago, and it was in Northcote, and it was about $30 when I bought the brooch, but I knew that I'd be able to utilise that in a piece. So what I did then was added this gorgeous focal that came from Natalie Fletcher-Jones from Peruzzi, this Moroccan focal. This tassel came from Sports Girl, and then this sort of bead at the end here, which is part of the clasp, came from Budapest or Prague or somewhere. So you can see they've sort of added three components, some little glass flower buttons. I think they came from Joe at Cranberry Beads, some pearls, some blue silk that I stuffed in behind the face, because the face is actually, it's not flat. It's got a bit of a dome on it. So I actually used some blue silk, and I bunched it up and so that it filled out his face. So he's got some blue face there. And then I've got, you know, this other piece over here, which is all my found objects. So bits and pieces that have been collected. Scrabble tiles, washers, you know, keys. I don't wear this because I sound like a Jersey cow when I wear it, but it is a, you know, a collection, you know, my son's vice captain badge on there as well. And then my other piece over here using the Chandelier Spike is the ring holder that I made from Nancy Kane's class. So you can utilise, you know, your found objects to make not only beading, but a beaded, you know, tool. So there's the Rivoli centre is in the bottom of that particular piece. And then I've just, you know, that one did take a few days to get done. But, you know, beaded a beautiful Delica sort of frame to go around that as well. Glenda, I can show you that backing. Just bear with me. I'll find a piece that I've actually done that on. I will go through and do some more work on that. There it is there. I'll go through and do some more work on that fringe piece, and I'll show that a bit later. But if you want to see beaded backing, beaded edge, here is where I've done a Demi round beaded edge in bead embroidery. How beautiful does that look? When you look at the piece, you know, straight up and down like that, oh, that's upside down, I'll put it the right way. When you look at it like that, what I love about this type of edging is how neat it actually sits against the beadwork. It's really flat, it's not intrusive, you know, you don't need to do anything with that, it's finished on its own right. And that nice, you know, sort of lacy effect that comes from the Demi rounds is beautiful. So you can either use a Demi round or an O bead to create that sort of edging. And that's what I'll do on that piece so that it doesn't need anything else added to it. You can see I love a shield shape. I do those sort of shapes in lots of different things. So that's a little bit more. I'll just go back over here and show you again what I was thinking with these other pieces. So again, a brooch, you know, haven't worn it, bought it somewhere, I don't know. But what I'll do is I'll take the brooch back of that. I will mount that onto a piece of stiff stuff, excuse me, and then I'll put a tassel on it. There's a Collingwood piece straight up, which I need to make. This was another piece that I've had sitting here for ages and I really want to do something with it. But this was a brooch that was my grandma's. And what I did was I just took the brooch back off that. Again, I really gently took it off because I didn't want to ruin it, but it had been sort of glued on. Excuse me. And what it's got there is a sort of a jade drop. And I think that was my brother's. So the jade goes really nicely with that piece, and a couple of pieces of sort of square jade that my mum gave me from Alaska. So, you know, they're the sort of things that I think when I lay out my pieces, I can see how that will all come together, minus the brooch back. And then I've just added some sort of, you know, darker greys, some silver colours, and a bit of a sort of a matte red, you know, to highlight. So thinking about the colour combinations of that will go together. Again, there's, you know, a piece that I got in an op shop that was $2 with these little polymer clay rings. Use them on anything, make earrings, whatever. I haven't even taken it apart, but that's what that is. And this, of course, is some Chandelier Spikes and the Rivolis. So, you know, from that very start of a spike like that, I've gotten the spike and I've gotten the Rivoli top. So, you know, I can use that to make earrings like I've shown, or make pendants. You know, some little gold drops that were a piece that I think I got from my mum from, I don't know where she bought them from, but, you know, I've managed to lose the chain, etc. I can make that again. And so there, this is one of the ugliest things I ever made. Rosemary Cox and I did this in America at Bead and Button, and we laughed the whole time because we figured it was the ugliest piece ever. I think I really need to take it apart because the glass is not bad, but the rest of it's shocking. It's just sort of sat in a drawer. We laughed so much when we made it. It was so bloody awful. And you can see there it's got some little fringing and rickrack, and it's got a really good brooch back on it with a sort of a fringe piece. So I'm going to take that apart and use those pieces in something. So it's really just a matter of thinking about what you've actually got in your beadwork, excuse the mess over here, how you can utilise those things. So there's the Rivoli earring, there's the Chandelier Spike pendant, and of course I'm going to make, you know, the wedding necklace and the jade necklace and all that sort of stuff as well. So that's probably enough from me. You've heard me talk for, you know, a good hour and whatever. I hope you've really enjoyed that. By all means, send me any suggestions you've got for these Facebook Lives because I really do enjoy doing them. pretty much once a month on a Saturday. I will go through and demonstrate different things that are beading related. So if you've got suggestions, and thank you Cheryl for this one, so that came from Cheryl to do some found objects, let me know and I will, you know, come up with different classes. I think my next one I'm going to do is inspiration on the fly. So pretty much Linda is going to give me a box of bits and pieces and I'm not going to have any time to think about it. I have to just make something with those. So that'll be great fun too. Thanks everybody again. This will be live available on the Facebook page for you to watch at another point when you've got some more time. And I look forward to making a draw from everybody who commented to win a chandelier spike and a couple of Rivoli tops. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.